Hi, everybody. Welcome to our channel. I'm Les.
And I'm Nina. I have a master's degree in history. I study dead people.
I don't know much about history, but I do have some questions regarding.
Genghis Khan.
So, kick us off, Nina. What can you tell us about Genghis Khan?
Well, first, Genghis Khan isn't his name, it's his title.
Kind of like Caesar or King.
Absolutely. His name's actually Temujin, and he's from the Mongolian steppes. He probably had a pretty consistent or typical childhood. His father had actually abducted his mother and forced her to marry him. And his father was a chief, right? Some kind of clan leader. But his dad was actually poisoned when Temujin's 10 years old. From there, we know that his family's completely impoverished. Everyone kind of deserted the
Do you have
clan.
a big family or?
We know he had at least six siblings, but we don't know how many sisters he had. We know at 14, he actually kills his half brother to take leadership of the clan. And by the time he's
At 14?
at 14, by 18, he's actually conquering other clans and kind of building what becomes his empire.
So, how much land did he end up conquering or taking over?
Well, he actually has the largest land based empire the world has ever seen, even today. Let me put it this way: Russia is the largest country in the world. It's almost two times the size of the United States. Well, Genghis Khan's empire, 30% bigger than Russia. It spans all of Eastern China, most of Southeast China, all of Central Asia, and even part of Central Europe.
And how did he put the armies together to actually do his conquering? Were these just local clans or?
He kind of built his army as he conquered. So, one of the innovations he had was he put units of 10 men together with their own commanding officer, right? And this allows his army to be really nimble because he can say, okay, you 10 units go that direction, you 15 go that direction. The rest of us are going to go straight
So he was kind of
forward.
like his own general. So he kind of did he have military training to do this, or did he just?
Not the way you and I would think about, going to school or anything like that. He had on the job training. Remember, he starts conquering other tribes at 18, right? In his mid 40s in 1206, he has conquered all of the clans of Mongolia together and sets his sights on China.
So you're talking about schooling. What kind of schooling did he have? What kind of education? Was he literate?
He wasn't. In fact, the Mongolians did not have a writing language. When he actually conquers northern China, he takes the Uyghur language, written language, which is the Muslim um, ethnicity in northern China, and he has them adapt their written language to the Mongolian spoken language. But in terms of formal education, he didn't really have any.
What about the hierarchy? The way that he surrounded himself with his generals and working his way down to the individual soldiers. Do we have any idea how that worked?
Yeah, he tended to surround himself with the best and the brightest, right?
So these weren't necessarily family members.
No, he actually creates what we might call a meritocracy. He is promoting people based on their merit and loyalty, not based on how closely connected they are to him. And he does this even with enemy soldiers. If an enemy soldier is willing to be incorporated into his army and shows some kind of talent, Genghis Khan will reward him, probably even promote him.
And what about pay?
This is interesting, and this is something that militaries and conquerors of the day would get. They wouldn't necessarily get taxes, but they would say, I want this much in tribute. Maybe I want 500 pounds of gold a year, right? And then it's up to the region to figure out how to get that to them. Well, I mean, clearly Temujin could have kept it all for himself, but he doesn't. He redistributes that tribute to everyone in the army, everyone from the generals all the way down to the rank and file. And based on things like rank and how long you've been there will depend on how much you get, but everyone's pretty well off.
Now, he's a conqueror.
Mhm.
So how ruthless was this individual?
Oh, he was very ruthless. Scholars think about 40 million people died because of Genghis Khan. He would go in and he would offer you the option to surrender. If you didn't, then he killed everyone. Maybe he'd leave a couple of people to kind of go in front of his army to spread the word of what he was going to do. He's great at psychological warfare. Um, but not all, he didn't personally kill, or his army didn't personally kill
Hmm.
40 million people. For example, he doesn't have supply lines. There's really nothing on the Mongolian steppes that he can use to feed his army. So they kind of march on their stomach, right, and get whatever there is.
So they just raid the individual villages or
Mhm.
clans as they come across them.
Absolutely. But when he gets to northern China, one of the local rulers decides to destroy anything that might be of use to Genghis and his armies. And we know probably about 10 million people in that region died of famine. So did Genghis kill them? Not directly, but they still died because of him.
Oh my gosh! And how did he treat his loyalists? Were they really well rewarded?
They were. If you were loyal to Genghis Khan and you were talented, that's a big deal.
Now, what do you mean by talented?
Meaning you were good at your job, right? Whatever job that happened to be. He was going to reward you. Now, if you're not good at your job, right, he might kill you, he might exile you, he might move you. Um, and if you were a rival, meaning that he thought you might be able to have the support to overthrow him, he was going to kill you too.
Oh, he wasn't even going to take a chance.
No, I mean, one of his best friends, Jamuka, when he was young, they actually started like conquering together, but then became rivals. And Genghis had him killed.
Wow. Now I've heard that Genghis Khan was kind of a womanizer, which I guess is kind of a common thing back then. So, what was his marriage situation like?
Well, keep in mind, we know he has at least 16 million male descendants today because geneticists can actually trace,
So he's a
right,
busy
his
man.
lineage,
Uh
right,
huh.
on the male gene. So chances are he probably has that many female descendants too. He has 6 wives, which is not uncommon at the time,
Mm-hmm.
especially for such a powerful man. And he also had probably about 500 concubines.
500.
Mhm. Now, did he have sexual relationships with them all? We don't know. Keep in mind that Genghis and the people surrounding him were all illiterate. With the exception of the secret history of Mongols, we don't have anything from the Mongolians themselves. Everything's written by their enemies. But with 16 million descendants, he probably had a lot of sex.
Wow. And did all these women and wives travel with him as part of his entourage, or?
We know that they're a mobile society, meaning that there weren't any like capital cities in Mongolia, right? The clan
So,
traveled
so
together.
he's nomadic then. So
He's
he,
nomadic.
I
And so
gotcha.
he continues that even after he has all of this land. Like there are some cities, right, that he'll spend time in. And after he dies, right, his descendants do create capital cities. Um, but yeah, he kind of travels with everyone. Keep in mind that to be a concubine or a wife, sometimes that's the easiest way to ensure loyalty, right? Is, oh, you just surrendered. I'm going to take one of your daughters,
Uh-huh.
right? And I'm going to either marry her if you're really important, or I'm going to make her concubine, meaning that I'm now responsible for her well being and upkeep.
Okay. So it was became his responsibility to take care of them. So he was very protective of all these women.
He was. In fact, it was illegal for men who were not eunuchs, eunuchs meaning they have been castrated. Those are the only men allowed in his harem.
Wow. So tell me why, what's his drive? Was this to push a particular religion? Was he after power? Or was it after money? What was his motivation that we can see for becoming a big conqueror?
Initially, it was just about survival, right? There isn't great farming along the steppes, right? And so this is how you survived, right? You raided other clans. You especially raided China. In fact, the Great Wall of China is built to keep the Mongolians out. It didn't work, but they tried. And so initially, remember I told you that after his dad died, they were pretty poor. So initially, it was to feed his family and their followers, right? And then it was, oh, well, I can take a little bit more and I can take a little bit more. But beyond that kind of initial survival, we don't really know. We know that he did follow the traditional religion of the Mongolian steppes, but when he conquered you, he let you keep your religion,
Hmm.
right? He wasn't interested in changing your religion or pushing his religion. We know he demanded tribute, right? But that's what conquerors did. I conquer you, you give me stuff, and I don't come back,
And that's what
right?
he used to pay his armies and what.
Yeah, absolutely. And to feed, his huge entourage. But as to why he continued to do it, it's really unclear. We don't have anything that said Genghis Khan says or Temujin claims, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's hard to know what his motivation is. Of course, the people he conquered just thought he was a bloodthirsty barbarian who liked to kill.
I can understand that. Wow. So what have we gained from Genghis Khan? What kind of contributions has he provided for us that we see today?
Oh, it is huge. The modern world may not have arrived without Genghis Khan. For example, I already told you he redistributed wealth. So that means that wealth from one part of his empire, which is huge, right, made its way to the other side. And so he has the Silk Road, which is a series of thousands of miles of roads that connects China through East Asia into India, through the Arab world into Spain, North Africa, Sub Saharan Africa. Well, it had been in pretty bad disrepair before Genghis Khan. So he repairs it. So it's easy to trade again. Um, and based on that, he created passports.
Passports.
Hmm.
Someone who's wasn't literate creates passports.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he knew where people were, and his officials knew where people were traveling. Right? In fact, when Marco Polo leaves Italy and ends up in China under Kublai Khan being Genghis's grandson, he's given a golden passport that allows him to travel anywhere in China. Well, we wouldn't have a golden passport without Genghis.
Really?
Hmm. My favorite thing is that he has a Pony Express, right? Remember, the Mongolians are expert riders. So in the United States, we think of the Wild West, in which the Pony Express, right? A rider is carrying the mail, right? Rides from one post to another. Maybe he has something to eat. Maybe he rests. Maybe, right, they change horses and they go on. Well, Genghis Khan created this, right? And it lasted a lot longer than it did in the Wild West.
So this was a complete network of horses and riders?
Yes, and stations.
So they had stations set up in certain parts of the country, I suppose, maybe not in every village, because literacy is at such a low rate that these would be uh, um, only people that can really use it would be educated people or privileged individuals of some sort.
Absolutely. But we think that an entire industry sprouts up, right? So maybe my sister had been wife married off, right?
Hmm.
So I go to the literate person in my city and say, "Hey, I want news of my sister." Right? Will you write down a letter? And so they do. They use the Pony Express. They send it to wherever the sister is. The sister then pays someone to read it to her and respond.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
And of course, the literati, those people who are literate, are exchanging correspondences too.
Wow. What else did he bring to us?
Well, he outlawed slavery amongst Mongolians. So if you were Mongolian by birth, right, you could not be enslaved. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't enslave people he conquered. Of course he did, right? But this idea of not enslaving other people was pretty important. He actually spreads a lot of things from China that make their way into what is today Europe. First, because of Genghis and his followers. For example, paper. Right, paper is a Chinese invention. Um, Paper currency, right? Those dollar bills in your wallet,
Uh-huh.
right? Those originate in China. How do they get to the rest of the world? Well, because of Genghis and the way that he has organized his empire. Gunpowder, right? The compass, the trousers you wear,
Uh-huh.
right? He didn't invent these things, but he invented the mechanisms by
They were
which
spread out.
they could spread from China forward. And finally, he made it illegal for men to capture women and force them into marriage, right? Remember, his mom had been forced to marry his father. His first wife had actually been kidnapped by a rival clan, and we think that's actually the first clan that Temujin ever conquered to get her back. Right? So he really prized women, which was very unusual at the time. It's hard to say that I admire someone who is, well, he is bloodthirsty. I mean, he does kill, a lot of people do die. Um, but he had a vision, right? And he made that vision possible. And for that, I really do admire him. He's in my top 10 favorite historical people.
Really
Mhm.
interesting. Well, thank you so much for telling us about Genghis Khan, Nina, and thank you for tuning in. We will try to do a broadcast about once a week with a different character. And
If you liked this, subscribe below. If you have someone that you're just dying to know more about that Les can ask me questions about, go ahead and put that in the comments. We'd love to hear it.
thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.